Hello, I am Federico Magni. I am a PhD candidate in management at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I am currently in the job market and I'm planning to graduate next summer. In this video, I will briefly introduce my research program and my job market paper. My research program lays at the intersection of management, artificial intelligence, and arts. And in my first dissertation essay, which is also my job market paper, I study people's creativity evaluations and how these evaluations are affected by the identity of the producer as AI or human. In my second dissertation essay, I also study AI in organizations. In particular, I study how the usage of AI in the recruitment process impacts job applicants' perceptions of the organization. My research efforts are placed into three main areas of interest. The first one is creativity, and my third dissertation essay is also on this topic, in particular studying how team error management impacts team creativity. The second area is diversity, in particularly concerning the study of generational differences in the workplace. And the third area is learning. So I will move to talk about my job market paper, which studies creativity evaluations and how these evaluations are impacted by the identity of the producer. Artificial intelligence was associated mostly with algorithmic tasks before, but in recent times, more and more artificial intelligence is being used also to perform creative tasks. As you can see in the slide, artificial intelligence is used, for example, to create paintings, poetry, but also music, and also other productions that are not concerned with the artistic domain, such as the creation of new compounds for drugs or even new startup ideas. But now that we know that artificial intelligence can be creative, we still don't know how people evaluate the creativity of artificial intelligence. And this is the question that I aim to answer with this study. So let's take a step back and talk about creativity and creativity evaluation in general. Creativity is defined as the generation of novel and useful ideas and products. And usually the bulk of the creativity literature focuses on the idea generation stage of creativity. Yet, recent studies are placing more and more emphasis on the stage of creativity evaluation. Creativity evaluation is at least as important as the idea generation stage because ideas need to be supported and acknowledged so that they can get to idea implementation stage. And if ideas are not acknowledged to be creative, they will not be funded. Resources will not be allocated to them. And so they will likely die without ever seeing the light of day. So creativity evaluation is important, but what do we know about it? Actually, we know that people are not very good at evaluating creativity and have a lot of biases actually in their creativity evaluations. Yet, those biases that the extant literature talks about are about human producers. We don't really know much about whether people are biased in their evaluation of AI creativity. To understand people's biases in creativity evaluation, in particular regarding artificial intelligence, I build my theoretical framework on lay theories. Lay theories are people's fundamental understanding about how the world works and how events and occurrences around them operate. And people rely a lot on lay theories when they cannot really evaluate or understand what's happening around them. And creativity, of course, is a case of this, because it is really hard to assess creativity with objective criteria. So people tend to rely a lot on lay theories in their assessment of creativity. But what specific lay theories or folk theories do people use when they evaluate creativity? And in particular, when they evaluate creativity of productions made by artificial intelligence? So the first relationship that I study in this paper is directly the producer identity bias effect on creativity evaluation. We know from existing theories that actually people interpret the behaviors of artificial agents in the same way or in a very similar way as they interpret the behaviors of humans. But at the same time, people are still knowledgeable of the fact that these two kinds of agents are different. In particular, they know that artificial agents cannot feel empathy or other emotions, and they also perceive that these agents do not possess a superordinate intentionality, so they do not have these ultimate goals that humans instead are perceived to have. And empathy and intentionality are key constructs in the evaluation of creativity and are supposed to be or are believed to be very important to be creative. So for this reason, we argue for the existence of a producer identity bias, in particular, showing or hypothesizing first that people have a bias against the creativity of artificial intelligence compared to humans. Next, we try to understand how this bias works and how its effect on creativity evaluations works. And for this, we build on the effort heuristic. The effort heuristic informs us that humans are perceived to exert more effort in carrying out a specific task compared to a machine or an artificial agent carrying out the same exact task. And this perception of increased effort expended into carrying out the task adds to the value of the production. So people perceive this production as more valuable when they perceive that the agent has put more effort into it, and they do so to reduce their cognitive dissonance. But at the same time, if they also think that humans put more effort than machines or than artificial intelligence in carrying out a task, this means that they will discount the value of productions made by artificial intelligence, and this should also apply to creativity. So our second hypothesis is about the mediation of effort perceptions on the main effect that we hypothesized before. Next, we also conceptualize implicit theory of creativity as a very relevant lay theory, especially because we are studying creativity evaluations. So implicit theory of creativity studies the belief of people about creativity and whether they believe that it is a fixed skill that agents cannot really improve, or whether it is an improvable skill that can be increased or enhanced with effort and training and learning. So here we argue that if people have a more fixed belief about the nature of creativity, then they will have a weaker effect of their bias against artificial intelligence. This is because people are found to believe that artificial intelligence generally cannot improve itself. And so if artificial intelligence cannot improve itself, people who believe that creativity can be trained will be more bothered by the fact that AI has a fixed capacity of creativity. Whereas people who begin that the creativity of AI is fixed to begin with, they will not be as bothered. So we have a moderation hypothesis here, and we argue that the more one has a fixed implicit theory of creativity, the less this person will be biased in his or her evaluations of creativity. Finally, we also conceptualize the domain of production as another important moderating factor. Here we have a pair of creativity, which is artistic and organizational creativity, and these two are usually pitted against each other. The main difference between them being that organizational creativity, as I defined before, relies on novelty and usefulness, whereas artistic creativity is more concerned with the novelty component. For this reason, organizational creativity is somewhat easier to assess because usefulness, which is often associated with economic value, provides a more objective criterion that people can use to evaluate creativity. Whereas in the arts, the evaluation of creativity is much more ambiguous. And higher ambiguity leads to higher reliance of folk theories or lay theories. So for this reason, I argue that when the production of artificial intelligence or humans is embedded in the artistic domain, the previously hypothesized relationships will be stronger than when the same production is described as happening in the business domain or in an organizational context. So the hypothesis 4 is that the previously hypothesized effects will be stronger in the artistic domain as compared to the business domain. Here, I will briefly show you the theoretical model with the hypothesis that I have just mentioned. So hypothesis 1 is about the baseline effect of producer's identity on creativity evaluation. Hypothesis 2 is about the mediation of effort perceptions on such relationship. In hypothesis 3, we study how the implicit theory of creativity of the evaluator impacts these relationships. And we argue that the stronger the fixed implicit theory, the weaker the relationships will be. And finally, we have the domain of production, and we argue that all of these relationships will be stronger in the artistic domain as compared to the business domain. So to test these 4 hypotheses, we have 4 experimental studies with different designs. I will briefly go through them. In study 1, which was conducted within person, we just tested the baseline effect and we found support for it. So hypothesis 1 was supported meaning that people evaluated the creativity of paintings that were assigned to an artificial intelligence producer as lower compared to the creativity of the same paintings when they were assigned to a human producer. In study 2, we used the same evaluation target, which is Australian Aboriginal painting, but the design was different because it was between person. We found again support for our hypothesized relationships, meaning that people evaluated the creativity of the paintings as higher when they believed that a human created them as compared to when they believed that artificial intelligence created them. The same was true for effort perceptions, and we did find effort to mediate the relationship as hypothesized. Furthermore, we also found support for hypothesis 3, as implicit theory of creativity moderated the effect such that it was stronger for people who had a more incremental implicit theory of creativity. So the fixedness of one's implicit theory of creativity dampens the effect according to our, consistent with our hypothesis. Study 3 had the exact same design, but we changed the evaluation target. So instead of using paintings, we used advertisement posters. And quite surprisingly, we found differences. In particular, most of the effects were not supported, except for the effect on effort, which was still supported. So there was no baseline effect and no moderation by implicit theory of creativity. And so we were trying to understand why this happened. And taking together studies 2 and 3, we already have an indirect test of a hypothesis 4 about the domain of production, because the effects were stronger in the artistic domain about paintings than in the business domain about posters. And in study 4, we actually test directly the hypothesis 4 about domain of production. So in study 4, we have a 2x2 design, and we not only manipulate the identity of the producer as AI or human, but we also manipulate the context of production, such as business or arts. And we do find, again, support for the baseline hypothesis 1, and also for the mediation by effort. We do find also support for the moderation of implicit theory of creativity, but only on the indirect effect. And then finally, we also find support for partial support for hypothesis 4, because the moderated mediation was significant in the artistic domain, but it was not in the business domain. So we found the effect to be stronger in the arts, but not as strong in the business domain. This is the summary of results in our theoretical model, and the lines that you see are the relationships for which we found support. So the main findings of this study is that people tend to have a producer identity bias, which impacts their creativity evaluation. And in particular, they discount the creativity of artificial intelligence. And such bias operates through perceptions of effort. Yet, we found that this bias is not ubiquitous, but rather dependent on both internal and external factors to the evaluator. Internal factor, for example, being the implicit theory of creativity that the evaluator holds, an external factor being the domain of production, such as arts rather than business. The contributions of this study are to several literatures. We contribute, of course, to the creativity evaluation literature by introducing the producer identity bias, which was previously unstudied. We also contribute to folk psychology, in particular, applying the folk theory of humanoid behavior to creativity evaluation. And we also contribute more broadly to literature on AI-human interaction, in which the human perspective is somewhat under-researched, because most studies focus on the AI side and on how to make AI more friendly, but they do not study how humans interpret the behaviors of artificial intelligence. So this is everything I have for today. I will be happy to answer any questions you might have, and thanks for the attention.